Okay, this lesson is on financially fluent, flush, and accumulating. So let's just draw out a bit about what is going on with money and finances. And I've got to say, I'm not necessarily an expert in this topic. I think I'm more of a natural at it. And some of us are that way, and some of us are that way. And money can be a big barrier for some of us are wanting to know how do people actually earn at the next level and what does that look like? And so I just wanted to take a little bit of time and again to say that this is something that is an awakening water because we're talking about currency and currency means something that has a current. So again, just to give us a bit of a sense of current is meant to move, right? That's what it has. And it's not stagnant. And this is important because if we understand currency, right, that currency is meant that there's supposed to be an exchange. And I know I'm not telling you anything new here, but it's maybe a way of thinking that will be helpful to you in some way. Some light bulb might go off. And that's all that we're really hoping for here is that some little aha goes off as we start to understand the nature of currency. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Guy Kawasaki, he talks a lot about how, like, before there was the gold standard, before 1970 in the United States of America, there's the gold standard. So all the money that was like out and about was backed by gold. And then after 1970, money indeed became even more of a currency because there's actually nothing there's nothing backing it. There's nothing behind it, right? So now this movement of money has actually it's increased since 1970 because it's no longer backed by the gold standard. And to me, this is really quite fascinating uh, because it actually means that there's more currency available. It means that there's been, if you will, and I'll just add a little bit of color here, that there's been an increase in flow since 1970. And this means that there's a lot of capital available. And in many ways, like the more we want to exchange, the more we're in that flow, the more we're in the old way, which is like basically earn money, save your pennies. And what happens with that methodology is that because inflation is rising, because your dollar today is worth less tomorrow, it's a really sort of it's a very stagnating, limited way of going. It's actually like more anti-accumulation. So we need to look at the money that we have and how are we actually using that money to be in that current. So it's actually generating more and more energy so that it's generating more and more value. And this is the thing, right? Is that in order to exchange, if we want more, right? If we want more money, as they say in some of the favorite rap songs I listen to, if we want more money, that means that we have to have increase exchange of what? Of value. And in exchange for that value, we get more money, more money. All right. So these are some different ways of thinking. Again, a little review. Money it's a current, it's a currency, it's a value of exchange. If we want more of it, we need to be exchanging more value. If our money is stagnant, it'll naturally devalue over time as opposed to accumulate in value over time. And for most of us, we would rather that we became financially fluent, fluid, and accumulating or flush with cash. All right, flush with potential. We want our money to be circulating value. And again, I want you to reflect on a bit about how much water metaphors happen with money. And if we look at this circulation of money, and you think right now, like how am I using my access to money? So if we look at too, it's like what is your access to capital, and how can you access that capital and get it into circulation, right? How can you get it into the current so that it can generate more of itself, so that it can be regenerative instead of stagnant? And this is something to look at. I think for many of us, we don't, many of us are still really in the earn and save and kind of squirrel away money under the mattress rather than that which we have access to, how do we tap into that, and how do we get that into circulation? How do we get that to be generative, right? And to me, I know this was a huge mindset. I was really raised more in the, and it was very unconscious, subconscious. It wasn't directly talked about, but it was more of like work hard to earn money and then save your money, and to some degree invest your money. But what wasn't really taught to me, and I find that for many women, and because my courses and classes mostly have women, I want to speak to us, is we're often not thinking about our access to capital and how to use capital and to get a return on investment on the capital, right? So how can we access capital and then get an ROI as return on investment? And these are things that are just, I think, quite important to think about. I often work with this in terms of people in investing in courses and education that will help them actually earn more, will help them actually be more generative with money. And often people are like, well, I don't have the money saved. And I'm like, well, do you have access to capital? Right? Because most of us access capital in terms of, buying a home, or investing in college education, or college education for our children. And we look at certain ways that we don't actually access capital, in terms of like, oh, how much capital do I actually have access to now? And what could I use that to generative? How can I use that to creatively? How would you use, if someone said, here's an X amount of money, how would you do that to creatively generate more capital? And when we start to think this way, we start to actually get really concerned more with this return on investment, because often when we have access to capital, there's interest, right? That we have access to capital generally, and then it has to be more than the interest rate that we're paying on that capital. Okay, most of you hopefully are like, yes, I get this, I know this, great, awesome, I'm glad we're on the same page. So then the question is, how are you doing it? And is there a way that you want to do this at another level to become more financially fluid? And so an example here I'm going to use, and I'm really speaking to a lot of people in our community who are self-employed, or who want to kind of quit their job and do more of this thing on the side that'll generate more of the capital. So part of that is, if we look at this cycle of access capital to do what? And now this is like one of my big questions of like, what do you not want to do that you could pay someone else to do? So this is just one example. What would the ROI in terms of time, in terms of joy, in terms of money that could be generated? X, Y, Z. There's a lot of often factors in which we can measure a return on investment. And what we're really looking at right now is what's the ROI on the money, and that these other ones are going to be, if you will, they're going to be side benefits of becoming more financially fluid. That these are going to be cool little, awesome little things that start to happen because of that. So if one of the things that I see so many people in our boat do is that they're doing things they don't want to do, and they take X amount of time. So if you make this list of all the things you don't want to do, and I'll say don't, just to make this really clear, you don't want to be doing, and you come up with this task and this task and this task, and then you get a sense of what is the dollar amount per this task and this task and this task in terms of like the hourly wage. And this is one of the things that I often find is that people don't actually go through and calculate this. And so instead, what's happening is that a lot of this sort of creative juice, remember creatively generating juice, let me highlight this, right? This right here. A lot of this doesn't happen. It doesn't become generative. Instead, it becomes, remember this word back here? Instead, it becomes stagnant. And we'll just draw a big, hairy red box around stagnant, because we don't want stagnant to happen with our potential. And a lot of access to potential, in many ways, it's like access to potentiality. So when we do something like this, it just gives us a really different perspective of like, wow, if I were to have X amount of more time, how could I then generate more value with that time? But these certain things need to happen, and I would need to get them off my plate. And then often, like I say, people don't actually calculate what could be the ROI on that. So initially, there's not really often an ROI to someone doing something else for us. It's just that all of a sudden it frees up time. So what would you do with that freed up time? How could you become, and I'll write this question out, how could you become more generative, right? And so when we ask ourselves that question, it often brings us to a place of looking at the deeper questions with becoming financially fluid, which is on this exchange, how are you going to exchange more value for more dough? I'm liking my multicolored. And this happens in the, oops, this happens in the marketplace. And so I'm going to draw, this is going to be our building, and this is going to be the door. And we're going to call this the marketplace, right? And the marketplace right now is global. We'll hang a sign on it, and here's our planet. And we'll draw some blue oceans. And we'll draw some green land masses, right? This is a global marketplace. And this is tremendous. Like the amount of currency being exchanged now is exponentially more than ever before. Okay, so if we look at right now within the marketplace, there is more money in circulation, and it's creating more money and more money in circulation, which in many ways is devaluing how much this money is actually worth, but it's also opening a lot more creative potential. And what I'm seeing is that there's so many more people that are actually able to exchange in the marketplace based on their own value, right? Based on an individual value. There's so many more opportunities to enter the marketplace with the online commerce. I read a really fantastic report. I think I can add that into our links with this lesson. This phenomenal report that's showing globally what's happening with the online commerce, with online value exchange, with how many people are buying stuff online, how many people are selling stuff online, how like what this looks like in distributions across different countries, different parts of the world, et cetera. And the whole thing shows that there is a lot more exchange happening, that there's just a lot more of this happening every single year. And so the question, whenever we want more of the Benjamins, the greenbacks, the dinero, whenever we want more of that, the question has to be, how are we going to exchange more value? And this question is something that we need to be asking a lot, because it's also, you may have heard the word VUCA. Do you know what VUCA means? V-U-C-A. And this is describing the marketplace. It's also describing war zones. It's describing a lot of what businesses are up against in this day and age. So what is VUCA? I'm going to read straight from Wikipedia. The U.S. Army War College introduced the concept of VUCA to describe the more volatile, let's write the V in, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and we'll get into what these terms actually mean in a moment. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous multilateral world perceived as resulting from the end of the Cold War in the early 1990s. The common usage of the term VUCA began in the 1990s and derives from military vocabulary. It has subsequently taken root in emerging ideas and strategic leadership that apply in a wide range of organizations, from nonprofit to education. The deeper meaning of each element of VUCA serves to enhance the strategic influence of VUCA foresight and insight, as well as the behavior of groups and individuals and organizations. It discusses systemic failures, behavioral failures, and the characteristics of organizational failure. Okay, so V is volatility, the nature of dynamic change, right? That we're seeing that change is happening more than ever, and the nature and speed of change forces and change catalysts are all happening at a faster level. Uncertainty, the lack of predictability. So that's what uncertain is that we can't actually predict what's going to happen next as accurately as we could in the past due to the level of what? C, complexity, that there's just so many different things. There's so much information. There's so many things going on, right? It's just like there's so much going on to take account for the multiplex of forces, the confounding of issues, the no cause and chain the no cause and effect chain, right? There's no longer cause and effects as predictable, and confusion that surrounds it all. Ambiguity is the haziness of reality, the potential for misreads, and the mixed meanings of conditions, the cause and effect confusion. So what I've also learned in terms of the ambiguous that can be helpful is, let me just bring this in here. This is a fairly, I think, a good explanation of it. Causal relationships are completely unclear. No precedents exist. You may face unknown unknowns. And this is something that I see this all the time with just how much apps change. So in me exchanging value in the marketplace, I'm seeing a lot of this volatility, uncertainty, the complexity, just the nature of change is happening so fast, and the ambiguous is that like we don't know what we don't know is the best way to describe that. So we want, again, within the marketplace to get that these forces are alive and well within the marketplace, which makes it uh, no guaranteed results, right? There's not this cause and effect chain reaction. So it's increasingly complex, and yet, and in many ways, like a lot of these things, these are negatives right over here, right? But this creative potential over here is a positive. So this is part of just eyes wide open value and exchange in the marketplace. Okay, so all that is to say, like, so what's a gal to do? What are you going to do? What is the way that you're going to be able to exchange more value in the marketplace? And that's what we're going to look at. Because the marketplace is constantly moving, right? It's this place where all this currency is being exchanged. One of the things that I've come to notice, and this might seem obvious to some of the more deal makers versus the visionaries of you. Visionaries are often, mindset is way, way, way more in the future, whereas deal makers are right now in the marketplace. They're exchanging on the stock floor. Is that the marketplace gives immediate feedback. And this is one of the most amazing things is we can see what's going on right now and the value right now due to this immediate feedback loop in the marketplace. And I find this very, very fascinating because there's the marketplace again. It's global, right? And this is so important. It's global, and it's incredibly varied. It has all this complexity to it, right? It's part of that VUCA. It's growing more and more complex, and the number of needs that are able to be met now are so much more than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years, 20 years ago. And part of this is because of this creative potential is really being unlocked and unleashed. So at this point, I feel like we're going to be a little bit out of la la land because we're aware of VUCA. We're aware that the marketplace is giving immediate feedback, and we can use that feedback to inform ourselves. So how we've exchanged value in the marketplace previously, whether it's through a job and getting a paycheck, whether it's through self-generating income, whether it's taking an inheritance and investing it, right? We have some immediate feedback on what's working, what's not working. There's a ton of information out there that is, complex sometimes. Also ambiguous, right? But there's a lot of different ways to get input as to what's working and what's not working. Okay, so now the question is for you, right? Because what we're really looking at is you and how generative do you want to be? How do we unlock currency for you? How do you increase the exchange again of value for the exchange of dollars? And what is that going to look like in this next phase of your dharma? And in the next phase of your life. So I have some questions around that. I mean, my number one question always with whenever I want to make more money or have become more financially accumulating, one of the questions that I always ask myself is how can I exchange more value? And I usually ask myself this in the context of the marketplace. How can I exchange more value in the marketplace? And again, part of this asking better questions is we're now turning our brain into a generator. It's a solution generator, right? So if we don't ask the question, we're not going to generate these ideas. And we're not I've got to emphasize this so much. We're not looking for good ideas. We're looking for a certain volume of ideas. Because the things about ideas is ideas actually make babies. They breed each other. So like this idea and this idea will actually create this idea. And this idea will usually be much better than, we'll say this is A, B, C, D, E idea. So E is going to be better than both A and D. Whoa. Yeah. Right. And this is fascinating to look at, is often it's, again, in the beginning, you're just looking for volume of like, how can I exchange more value in the marketplace? And then what'll happen is you'll start to notice like, oh, by just simply writing it, I'm actually doing this generative thinking, right? I'm actually getting into these words of generative, I'm getting creative. And this is what currency loves. So this makes currency super happy. I should have refreshed my greens. Let's do it right now. Let's get a much more vibrant green. There we go. All right, and now super happy. And I love that in the United States, the color of money is green. That's actually a great movie, The Color of Money, because green to me is thrive. Green to me is, this is like thistle going everywhere. So one idea, like how can I exchange, and I just want to show you like how outlandish ideas can become. So thistle is everywhere around here. It's free, it's invasive. People will actually pay for it to be removed. It could be harvested and turned into green powder and sold for 20 bucks a pound, right? Wow, that's an idea. It's an idea. I might not want to do that idea, and I personally don't want to do that idea, right? But boy, it really points the way of potentiality. And that in this phase is all you're looking to unlock, is some potentiality of how you could exchange more value. Now, what you'll see is that most of the things that you're going to come up with are they're going to take time. And this is, again, back here, right? One of the things about things taking time is that you start to see the things that you're currently doing might not give you the same ROI as the things that you want to do. The other thing is that you might notice that some of those things that you want to do require access to capital. And to me, like if we just get this, and again, I hope this isn't too basic for you all, but these might be things that we know and we think about, but we aren't actually acting on. They're assumptions that we have, they're beliefs that we have, but we're not actually employing those. We're not actually making them generate more, accumulate more, right? Enable much more fluency with our finances. And that's really what we want to do. So I've really got to recommend James Altucher's writing in his books. He has a book particularly on money, which I'll pull up right now. Here it is, the Choose Yourself Guide to Wealth. Many of you have read his other book called Choose Yourself, and you might not know that he wrote this book on Guide to Wealth. And he says we're living, and you'll hear some of the VUCA stuff. We are living in an epic period of change, danger, and opportunity. The economy is crashing every few years. People are being fired and replaced by computers and Chinese workers. The stock market crashes with regularity. Every fix from the government makes things worse. The old world has been demolished, and people are desperate for answers. James Altucher's The Choose Yourself Guide to Wealth chooses or contains those answers. This is a field guide to the new world we live in. You can play by the old rules and get left behind, or we can use these new ideas and become wealthy. This is not a book for the faint of heart. Read at your own risk, because sometimes the truth is hard to take. All right. So again, I would say both James. James started Stock Picker. He's started a few companies that went to over $100 million. He's a very intelligent dude. And he, like Guy Kawasaki, are basically saying like the rules of the game have changed. And one of James's biggest ideas is just this. Your biggest asset is your ability to ideate on value and execute on those ideas. Okay, so one of James' biggest things that he talks about, and he says this all the time, this is my light bulb, is he says come up with 10 ideas per day. And what this does is it turns your brain on. It makes your brain start to think more. It turns your brain on to opportunities. And the more our brain's turned on to opportunities, the more it's actually going to pull in different conversations, more information, different relationships, etc. Okay. So again, if you start to see like, oh, how am I going to exchange more value in the marketplace? If this is something that you're really wanting to do, you've got to start to ideating on how you can exchange more value, right? How are you going to exchange more value? And some of your ideas are going to be horrible and you should never do them. And that point is, that's great. He says if the 10 ideas that you're going to generate, like you'll naturally cross 7 off the list, especially if you put a timer on the amount of time it takes for you to generate these 10 ideas, these A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, right? However long it takes you to do that, like you want to actually compress that to make your brain start to work faster. Now, once you have an idea that's good, right? Then the question is like, how can I do that? How, like, what are my next actions to doing that? So once you have a good idea, so you take, for instance, one good idea. For instance, if I look at a few years ago, I had members graduating from the Living Ayurveda course. So I had grads from Living Ayurveda course, and some of them wanted to go into yoga health coaching, and that was developed, and that was like, check, awesome, that's already done, sweet, and that'll help me generate more. Again, I'm going to generate money through what? Exchanging value. So I had a good value exchange for them. But then there was this whole other group that didn't want to become yoga health coaches, and they're like really awakening to Dharma. And I had been talking about this this idea of like maybe doing this 5 elements in action course and Dharma course and whatnot. And they said that is a good idea. So I took an idea and I ran a next action. So if you have a good idea, what is the next action? And often it's free. And this is important to realize, is usually you don't have to invest anything to figure out if it's a good idea. So all I did was talk to the grads of the Living Ayurveda course, and they said, yes. They said, we'll pay for that. And so I said, okay, great. It's going to be $2,000. I think the first Awake Living course was $2,000, and now I think we're selling it. I think we're going to go to $12,000 for a 2-year course, right? But you can see, like, wow, over 3 years, that price went up. So they said, yes. All I did was ask, and then I said, great. I'll make a pilot who wants to be in, and I will pre-sell the pilot. Free plus time. So no money invested. It's going to take my time. This is my clock, right? It's going to take some time. Now I've got to go right back to here. Of the time that I was spending doing the other things that were maybe also generating capital, now need to be freed up. I need to free up my time to be able to be more generative, more useful, exchange more value in the future. So now I need to hire someone to do some of these things that still need to be done, or I need to stop doing those things, right? And often we can change. That's my stop sign. We'll make it red. We often need to change what we're doing. And I find this every quarter right now in my planning. I need to decide what I'm not doing so I can decide what I am doing, or I need to decide what I am doing so then I can decide what I'm not doing. All right, so at this point, now I've generated, let's say I sold 6 of those passes at 12K or at 2K. Now I've generated 12K of income that I can actually invest in generating more income from it. I could put some of that in advertising. I could put some of it into a virtual assistant to run part of it. I can use some of it to just pay my income while I'm developing the course and needing to still eat and put a roof over my family's head. All right. So ask, pilot, pre-sell, and then there's the development, right? I've got to actually do it. Develop the idea, then scale the idea. And scaling is where often a lot more capital comes in. In the development, usually, again, we need some capital or we need a ton of time. It can be either one of those. So that's just an example. Again, to come back to the question of how can I exchange more value? If you want to make more money, you've got to ask yourself that all the time. Another example I'm going to run us through is right now, my husband and I are looking at this property. I told my dad, I'm like, this is the, let me draw it out. Like, this is the ugliest property you've ever seen. And it's shaped like this. And it has this really old house here. And this house should probably be flattened. Um, Let me draw this a little bit more accurately, because one of the massive values that I see in it is that there's this big, cool green lot back here. So this is all green, and it's right in the city of Driggs, and and Driggs is kind of one of these like up and coming towns. So this is all green space here, and this is a street. And this is a school park over here. So even though it's in the city, it's got all this green space. This house, and I'm just going to write it right out, this is like super ugly. This is a super ugly house. Yep. But it's a great location. Yay, right? And it's got all this green space around it. There's a trailer for rent back here. And there's an old shed here. And there's another old shed here. They recently changed the zoning on these lots in our town, and this lot can now be split into, and I'll put this, I'll just draw in, I just want to show what can happen with this lot, is this lot can actually be split like this, and even more. There can be this many dwellings. And the reason the city changed so this is an opportunity, right? The city changed the zoning. And the reason the city changed the zoning is we need more housing to increase housing. So this is an opportunity. If I'm asking myself every day, if I know this and I find out from my friend who works for the city that the city just changed the zoning, and I've programmed into my awareness, how can I exchange more value? And if I've programmed into my awareness to know exactly how much access to capital I can have a good idea of what I can do over here to actually be able to exchange. We'll get blue out to represent our exchange here, right? And you guys, I know for those of you who are in real estate investment, like this is nothing new. And so like I said, some of this is going to be repetitive, but for some of us, we just need to hear like, oh, there's a lot of different ways I can exchange value. Even though someone like me who's incredibly visionary and loves to create content and build a tribe and whatnot, there's other ways that I'm actually looking to exchange value outside of my core business. That's called diversification, financial diversification. Okay, so if I want to exchange more value and I know my city needs more housing, I can then say like, wow, if I were to basically provide more little cute houses, like we could actually put some cute houses in here, and then I can actually figure out the numbers to it, right? And these are some of the things, and then I could figure out exactly how much capital I need to buy and then to develop some of the ideas to be able to turn this into a place where not just nobody lives because it's an ugly abandoned house, but maybe this could actually be this could even be housing for something like 7 small families on this 1 acre, right? This could be for 7 small families in 10 years, something like that, right? So when I look at this property that way, my evaluation of the property is much higher than the asking price for it. Okay, so that's just one example that's coming from this mindset of idea generation, from coming from the question of exchanging value, and from knowing that I have access to capital. And that actually, if I were to purchase that would actually maybe free up even more access to capital because now I would have more assets. It becomes an asset. Isn't that so fascinating? Okay, that's we'll call that the ugly house project. So what I'd like you to do next is you're going to be ideating. That's your first to do is on that. How could I offer more value? And the next question is to get a sense of how much more value do you want to be exchanging? So this is something that often comes up in coaching calls. Is someone will say, I want to earn more money. And I'm like, how much, right? Why? Why am I always asking how much? This whole how much part of the question, to me, this is going to help me. It's going to help me see. It's going to give me, this is my eye. It's going to give me some vision to be able to know. It's going to actually, again, kind of orient my awareness to a certain way of accessing. Say I'm trying, say like I was coaching an artist the other day, and she wanted to exchange, I can't remember the number, I think it was $50,000 in the marketplace from her art this year. And it was like, okay, great. Now we can start to break some numbers down, and we can see this number for this, and this number for that, and this number for that. And we can look at, we can look at time, we can look at financial investment in order to be able to do that. We can start to see, because of this, like what does she what can she no longer do? What does she need to do, etc. So once you have a number, that's your next thing, is you want to generate a number. And so this is your box. And this is what you've got to do now, is if you want to exchange more value in the marketplace, give us a number. How much? Once you have that number, ask Dharma. Just go straight to Dharma and say, Dharma, how could I generate this much value? You can even ask Dharma, tell me how we will generate this much more value, if you want to put Dharma in the second person. And then again, you're going to ideate. Then you're going to select your best idea. And then you're going to take next small action. And remember, the next actions are usually free. They're usually really these small actions, right? Where's that example where I talked about the small actions? Here, where you're trading more on time, right? Where I went through the uh, asking the pilot, the pre-sell, it's actually generating income before I've actually invested any time into it. And then I'm getting paid to generate my idea. That's ideally how you want to do things. This has the same thing. This actually has a renter. This trailer has a renter, and this could be turned into 2 apartments. Again, there's a housing shortage here, so it's not going to be hard to rent these apartments. This could be turned into 2 apartments with an investment of $10,000, which each could be rented for about $1,500 a month, right? So instantly it can pay the rent if we factor that 10K into the buying cost. Fascinating, right? So that's what you want to start to see, is like, what small action is next. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's talking to someone, sometimes, like, it's, like I said before, it's like asking the right people the right questions and seeing what happens. It's getting investors, it's this, that, and the other thing. That is your work. You have to ask this question of Dharma. And again, you're going to ask this directly to your Dharma and get your Dharma ideating for you. Often we don't think of coupling or partnering with our Dharma to become more financially fluid. In my experience, Dharma wants me to be wealthy, because the wealthier I am, the more impact I can have, the more I can do with reinvesting that money into more and more positive impact. So there's different ways to think about it. That's a perspective and a belief I choose to employ. And it serves me really, really well. And I hope it does you too. All right, get to it and become more financially fluid and accumulating.